York Comic Con. I'm Megan Laux with CBR, and today I am joined by Dan Jurgens. Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Megan. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, today we're going to be talking all about the death of Superman. It's the 30th anniversary of the story. How is it going back and revisiting that story?
It was a lot of fun. I mean, first of all, it is hard to believe it's been 30 years, and as everyone can see, it meant I did the story when I was like 6 years old, seriously. But no, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been fun to get back with the same creative teams that we were working with then. Fun to see their work come across. You know, we used to see it in print in terms of photocopies and things like that. Now it comes across in email, so that's a little different. But going back and revisiting those times and those characters and touching on some of the high points of that story again has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. The death of Superman was some people's first story of Superman that they have ever read. What is it like to potentially bring that to readers again?
It's, every con I have ever done, every store appearance, there's always at least one person who comes up and says, this was my first comic book, or this is what got me into comics, or, my dad picked it up for me on the way home from work, or my grandmother did. Everybody has a story. So to get back into that and start to remember some of those things and hear those stories again and know that those people are going to see this and kind of get, I think, some of that feeling of nostalgia, maybe, I think will be a lot of fun. And at the same time, there's plenty of new stuff in this to appeal to new readers as well. And if they decide then to go back and check out The Death of Superman, so be it. I think they'll still get a good read.
Awesome. What is one of your favorite moments in the last 30 years with this character?
With Superman?
Yeah.
I just think it's not so much, I would say, one favorite moment as much as it is the awareness that for who I think is the premier character in comics, that I've been able to be associated with it for a fairly long time and to continue to contribute to that mythos that is so rich and vibrant with Superman.
Excellent. You have a new 6-part miniseries coming out called Lois and Clark 2 Doom Rising. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so one of the things we did when we did the Superman, or the 30th anniversary special that comes out in November, is we said, well, what can we build on here? So we actually have a couple of incidents happen in the special that will then carry us through to another story that's going to focus on young John Kent, because, it's a bit of a flashback to when he's younger, and Clark and Lois as a family unit. And we'll go back to the farm where they were living before, kind of that private, secret life that they had so they could raise John without the world knowing about it, and Superman sort of operating in secrecy a little more. So it's going to be drawn by Lee Weeks, who we did the miniseries with back in 2015. And Lee does such an incredible job with those 3 characters that I think people are really going to be excited by what they see.
What has that collaboration been like with all of these amazing writers and artists to create a brand new mythos for Superman?
One of the great treats in this business from the day I first got in it has been the ability to work with so many wonderfully talented people. And when I first got in, it was being able to work with some of the older creators whose work I admired, and to develop those relationships along the way with some really incredibly talented people. And Lee and I have done a few things before. He is a supreme storyteller, and working with Lee is always a wonderful special experience.
Excellent. I have a few fan questions that I asked on Twitter. Outside of your own stories of Superman, what ones kind of stick out as your favorites?
Oh man, there have been so many. Well, even as a kid, obviously there were a lot of great Superman stories then, and just I remember, and this was in a reprint that I read it, 80-page giant, Superman going back to Krypton for the first time and meeting his parents and things like that. That was a special story. I think that as we got into it, before I ever would have gotten there, Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow was a very special story. The story he did with Dave Gibbons, which was in an annual, I believe, where it was the wonderful story where it's, what do you get for the man who has everything? I think it was not Black Orchid. I'm trying to remember. Does anybody remember? No? Okay. But that was a very special story, and there have been many along the way.
Excellent. A lot of superheroes have died in the comics since Superman did in the 90s. What do you think is another great trial by fire that a character can go through to really create these amazing stories?
That is so individual to each character that it's hard to say. For some, it might be the loss of their powers. For other ones, it might be the loss of a more immediate family member or some other catastrophe that happens in their life to change things. And I think it really depends on who the character is. So I don't know that there's an easy automatic answer to that. It has to be very individual to really make it work for a character.
Excellent. What can fans expect to see from the new 30th anniversary of Superman coming out in November?
I think what they'll get to see is a rollicking good story, and I kind of touched on this earlier with the idea that if you were there, if you were someone who picked up the death of Superman at that time, you might remember what it was like when there were lines around all the comic book stores and people couldn't get their black bagged edition of the death of Superman and how it was on the tip of everyone's tongue. I mean, everyone was talking about it. And when I say that, I don't mean just people who read comics, because it was everywhere in the media. I think they'll get some kind of a fondness and kind of a buzz off it that way. Whereas at the same time, like I said, we also have some new stuff in it that will then spin out into something that we're going to see more of later. And I think within all of that, that the idea is to tell a good special Superman story that touches on Superman's life as well as young John, because we see this through the eyes of young John Kent, and he becomes very representative for what people experienced at that time.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Dan, for your time today. I'm Megan Laux with CBR. Make sure to check out CBR for more exclusive New York Comic Con content.